My future father-in-law, General David Harrison, a retired two-star general who saw the world as a battlefield to be managed, never missed an opportunity to tell me that I lacked discipline. He judged my quiet nature, my civilian clothes, and what he called my unstructured career. He had no idea that the very discipline he couldn't see, the kind forged not on a parade ground but in the silent crucible of high-stakes operations, was the exact thing that would one day earn me a salute from the most powerful man in the entire armed forces, right in front of his disbelieving eyes. The weeks leading up to my wedding to his son, Mark, were supposed to be a time of joy. Instead, they felt like a probationary period. The general, having retired from commanding armies, had appointed himself the supreme commander of our wedding preparations. Every decision, from the font on the invitations to the flavor of the cake, was subjected to his rigorous, unsolicited strategic analysis. I remember one evening in particular. We were at his house, a place of intimidating order and polished military memorabilia, ostensibly to finalize the guest list. Mark sat beside me, his hand a warm, reassuring presence on my knee. He knew these meetings were a trial for me. "The seating chart is a logistical mess, Eva," the general had declared, peering at my carefully arranged chart through his reading glasses. He wasn't wrong, but his tone was that of a superior officer addressing a failing cadet. "There's no tactical cohesion. You have my second cousin from the infantry seated next to Mark's progressive aunt from California. There's no thought given to established alliances or potential zones of conflict." "It's a wedding, Dad, not the Yalta Conference," Mark had interjected gently. "The goal is for people to mingle." The general had waved a dismissive hand, his focus entirely on me. "This is what I mean, Eva. In any command structure, from the platoon level to the theater level, there must be order. A lack of discipline in planning leads to chaos on the battlefield, or in this case, at a very expensive wedding reception." He spoke of discipline constantly. To him, it was a tangible thing. Perfectly shined boots, a razor-sharp crease in one's trousers, a voice that boomed with unquestionable authority. My own life, to him, was an affront to this worldview. I worked as a government consultant, a vague title I was required to use. I couldn't tell him that my consulting often involved 72-hour stress simulations or making strategic recommendations that affected national security. I couldn't explain the reason I was quiet wasn't a lack of confidence, but a deeply ingrained professional necessity. "Consultant," he'd scoffed during that same dinner. "In my day, you had a rank, a unit, a clear chain of command. You knew where you stood, and you knew who stood above you. This modern world of unstructured vagueness, it breeds complacency. It lacks rigor." He would look at me, his eyes scanning my simple, comfortable clothes. "You need to project more, Eva. Command presence. Shoulders back, head up. People need to see authority to respect it." Through it all, I would simply nod, offering a quiet, non-committal smile. Arguing would be pointless. It would be like trying to explain quantum physics to a man who only believed in the physical reality he could see and touch. My discipline was invisible to him. It was a discipline of keeping state secrets locked behind a calm expression. It was a discipline of maintaining a heart rate of 70 while making a decision that others would crumble under. It was the discipline of enduring his lectures for the sake of the good, kind man who sat beside me, the man I loved more than I resented his father's judgment. The final straw, the moment that solidified my resolve, came the week before the wedding. The general was inspecting the venue with us. He was lecturing the florist on the strategic placement of floral assets when he turned to me, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "I hope you understand the gravity of the uniform, Eva," he said, referring to the formal military dress uniforms that some of his old colleagues would be wearing. "It is a symbol of a lifetime of dedication, of order, of absolute discipline. I trust you will conduct yourself in a manner that respects that." The implication was clear, that I, in my wedding dress would be an undisciplined civilian anomaly in a sea of military greatness. He was worried I would somehow tarnish their honors simply by being myself. I looked at him, at this man who judged my entire character on superficial displays, and I felt nothing but a calm certainty. I would not argue, I would not explain, I would simply get married to his son, and I would let the truth of who I am and the respect I have earned present itself in its own time. His world was about to collide with mine, and he was completely unprepared for the impact. Later that night, long after Mark had fallen asleep, I stood by the large window of our apartment, looking down at the city's grid of lights. Each light represented a life, a story, a world of complexity that couldn't be understood from a distance. The general's final cutting remark about respecting the uniform echoed in my mind, not as an insult, but as a profound miscalculation. He saw the world in terms of visible symbols, of brass and polished leather. He had no concept of the silent, unseen world where I had spent my entire adult life. My love for Mark was my anchor in these moments. He was the one person who had never tried to define me. He saw my quietness not as a weakness, but as a depth he wanted to explore. He knew my work was demanding and secretive, and he never pushed for details I couldn't give. He simply trusted me. He loved the person who came home at the end of the day, the woman who could find joy in a shared pizza on the floor or a walk in the park. He loved me for my calm, never suspecting the storms it was trained to withstand. And for that love, I would endure 1,000 lectures from his father. My mind drifted to the two vastly different worlds we inhabited. The general's world was one of parades and pageantry, of barked commands on a sun-drenched field, of a rigid hierarchy where respect was demanded by the insignia on one's collar. It was a world of external discipline, of appearances. My world was the opposite. It existed in quiet, sound-proofed rooms, deep within secure federal buildings, places a 2-star general of infantry would never have clearance to enter. My world was the tank, a windowless strategic operations center, where the only sounds were the soft hum of supercomputers and the low, measured tones of analysts processing real-time geopolitical data. Discipline in my world wasn't a creased uniform. It was the ability to analyze a dozen conflicting intelligence streams and make a recommendation in under 30 seconds, knowing that lives depended on it. It was the mental fortitude to sit through a 3-day-long crisis simulation, deprived of sleep, while being psychologically prodded and pushed to your absolute breaking point, all to see if your decision-making would hold. I remembered one such simulation, the one that had earned me my last promotion. It was a hostage scenario in a politically volatile region. Every choice led to a worse outcome. The textbook solution, the one that followed protocol, resulted in a simulated diplomatic catastrophe. I made a different call, a cold, hard, utilitarian choice that sacrificed a symbolic asset to guarantee the safety of critical intelligence personnel. On the debriefing screen, my choice was flagged as suboptimal by the junior evaluators, but I remembered the follow-up call, the private one from the office of the commander of the armed forces himself. There were no congratulations, just a quiet, gruff acknowledgement. "Captain Rojas," the 4-star general had said, his voice gravelly over the secure line. "That was the correct call, the only call. Well done." That was my reality, a world where praise was a quiet, classified acknowledgement, and where your worth was measured not by how loudly you shouted, but by how calmly you thought under unimaginable pressure. I was Captain Eva Rojas, a lead strategist for a Joint Command Intelligence Task Force. The consulting I did was for men like the commander, men who didn't care about the shine on my shoes, only about the quality of the intelligence I provided. I turned from the window and looked at the simple, elegant wedding dress hanging on the back of the closet door. It was soft, flowing, and utterly civilian. In the general's eyes, it was a symbol of my disconnect from his world of disciplined service. But to me, it felt like the ultimate luxury, the freedom to be simply Eva, Mark's wife. I didn't need his father's validation. My service wasn't written on a uniform or displayed in a metal case. It was etched into the quiet confidence of knowing that in the rooms where it truly mattered, my discipline was not only seen, it was respected at the highest level. And I was ready to marry the man I loved, content in the silent truth of who I was. The day of the wedding arrived in the flurry of white lace, excited whispers, and the scent of fresh flowers. There was a genuine joy in the air, a warmth that radiated from my bridesmaids, from Mark's loving mother, and from every text message that buzzed on my phone. Yet underneath it all, I could feel the thrum of the general's influence, a rigid, unspoken schedule that governed the day's proceedings. He wasn't the father of the groom. He was the operations commander, striding through the venue with his chest puffed out, speaking into his phone in clipped, authoritative tones, ensuring his logistical assets were perfectly deployed. I stood in the small bridal suite just off the main hall, the soft silk of my wedding dress a comforting weight. I felt serene, ready for the quiet, profound promise I was about to make to the man I loved. Through the slightly ajar door, I could hear the murmur of the guests finding their seats, the soft strains of the string quartet warming up. Mark was waiting for me. This was our moment. It was then that I heard his voice, the general's familiar, booming baritone just outside the door. He was speaking to another man, someone with an equally commanding voice. I recognized the other man as Admiral Patterson, one of his oldest friends. "She's a beautiful girl, David," the Admiral said kindly. "Mark seems truly happy." "He is," the General conceded, but his tone was heavy with reservation. "She's a sweet girl, certainly. A bit unpolished for Harrison, perhaps. Too quiet. But he loves her." There was a pause, and I held my breath. The General continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "Let's just hope some of the military discipline in this room today rubs off on her. She'll need it." The word struck me not with the force of a blow, but with the chilling precision of a scalpel. Unpolished, rubs off on her. All this time I had endured his condescension, telling myself it was just his way, that he didn't understand my world. I believed that, in time, he would see past the surface and recognize my character. But in that single, unguarded moment, the truth was laid bare. He would never see me. He would only ever see a project to be fixed, a civilian to be molded, a woman who was fundamentally lacking and needed the Harrison discipline to be made whole. And in that moment of absolute clarity, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger that I felt, nor was it the sting of hurt. It was a profound and sudden sense of release. The heavy weight of seeking his approval, a burden I hadn't even been aware I was carrying, simply evaporated. It was gone. He was incapable of seeing me, and I was finally, completely okay with that. His judgment, which I had weathered and deflected for so long, no longer had any power. It was just noise. A deep sense of calm settled over me. My shoulders straightened, not because I was trying to project command presence, but because they were no longer slumped under the weight of his opinion. I was standing fully in the truth of who I was, and I was done apologizing for it, silently or otherwise. My path was my own. The sacrifices I had made were my own. The respect I had earned was my own. It did not require his validation. The wedding coordinator peeked through the door, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's time, Eva. Are you ready?" From the main hall, the first beautiful notes of the processional music began to play. I looked at my reflection in the mirror one last time. I wasn't just a bride anymore. I was Captain Eva Rojas, walking toward my future, whole and unbroken. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "I'm ready," I said. Walking down the aisle felt like coming home. All the noise, all the tension, all the judgment of the past few weeks simply faded away with every step I took toward Mark. His eyes were locked on mine, and in them I saw none of the doubt or criticism I have grown accustomed to from his father. I only saw love, pure and unwavering. He saw me, Eva, his future wife, and in that moment, that was all that mattered. The ceremony was beautiful, a perfect blend of tradition and our own personal touches. We exchanged our vows, our voices steady, our promises echoing in the quiet, sunlit hall. When Mark slid the simple gold band onto my finger, it felt less like a ring and more like an anchor, grounding me in this new, wonderful reality we were building together. We were a team. We were a family. As the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, a wave of joyous applause washed over us. We turned to face our guests, our faces beaming. And in that sea of smiling faces, my eyes caught a flicker of movement at the back of the hall. A man had slipped in during the ceremony, standing respectfully near the entrance. He was tall and distinguished, his posture ramrod straight even in the relaxed atmosphere. His dark blue service dress uniform was immaculate, the chest adorned with a dazzling array of ribbons and medals that spoke of a lifetime of unparalleled service. I recognized him instantly, and my heart gave a single, sharp jolt of surprise. Just as the recessional music was about to begin, the man moved. He didn't rush, but walked with a quiet, purposeful authority that seemed to part the crowd without a word. A hush began to fall over the guests as they noticed him. I saw the other military officers in attendance, the general's friends, their eyes widening in unison, their backs instinctively straightening. A wave of stunned recognition rippled through the room. The man stopped in the center of the aisle, about 10 feet from us. The entire hall was now utterly silent. He was General Anderson, the commander of the armed forces, the highest-ranking and most respected officer in the entire nation. He paid no attention to the gaping faces of the guests. He didn't look at my new husband, nor did he even glance at my father-in-law, who was half risen from his seat in the front row, his face a mask of confusion. The commander's gaze was fixed solely and directly on me. And then, in the profound silence of my own wedding, the most powerful man in the military brought his right hand up to his brow in a single, flawless motion. It was a salute, not a casual gesture, but a formal, crisp, and profoundly respectful salute, executed with a precision that was second nature. It was a sign of respect that, in the rigid world of military protocol, was almost unheard of. A 4-star general offering the first salute to a captain. It was a gesture that transcended the visible ranks, a symbol of a deeper, earned respect known only to those in the highest echelons of command. I met his gaze, and my training took over. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement, the most I could offer in my wedding dress. The silent message was passed and understood. I tore my eyes away from him and dared a glance at my father-in-law. The general stood frozen, halfway out of his seat. The proud, fatherly smile he had worn during the ceremony was gone, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. His military mind, better than anyone's in that room, understood the earth-shattering significance of what he had just witnessed. He understood the protocols, the traditions. He knew that what he had just seen was impossible unless the unpolished girl his son had just married was someone of immense, hidden importance. His face, which had been flushed with pride, was now a pale, sickly white. his mouth slightly agape as his entire, neatly ordered world crumbled around him in a single, silent gesture. The commander held his salute for a long, charged moment, his gaze locked with mine. In that silent, formal gesture, a bridge was built between my two worlds. The respect I had earned in the quiet, dangerous rooms of national security was now on public display, an undeniable fact in the sunlit hall of my wedding. I gave my small, respectful nod, and he crisply lowered his hand. The silence that had blanketed the room finally broke, not with applause, but with a tidal wave of confused, excited, and astonished whispers. General Anderson then turned to my husband. Mark, bless his heart, was looking back and forth between me and the commander, a look of pure, dumbfounded awe on his face. The commander smiled warmly, a genuine expression that transformed his stern features, and extended a hand to Mark. "Son, you are a very lucky man," the commander said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that carried easily through the quiet hall. "Your wife is one of an exceedingly small group of officers whose strategic counsel I have come to depend on. She is one of the finest our nation has to offer." Mark shook his hand firmly, his eyes shining with a pride so intense it almost brought tears to my own. "Sir," he managed to say, "I'm well aware." Then the commander turned his attention to my father-in-law. General Harrison looked as though he had been struck by lightning. He was still standing, a statue of broken pride, his face pale. "David," General Anderson said, his tone shifting from warm to professionally courteous, "a lovely ceremony." "General Anderson," my father-in-law stammered, his own voice, usually so full of command, now sounding thin and reedy. I had no idea. She never said." "That's rather the point of her unit, David," the commander replied smoothly, though there was an edge of steel in his voice. "They are the quiet ones, the ones who do the real work while the rest of us are busy with parades. You should be immensely proud." With a final, polite nod, he gave my hand a gentle squeeze and then discreetly melted back into the crowd. His duty was done. His duty was done, but the consequences of his actions had just begun. The wedding reception was a surreal experience. The power dynamic of the entire event had been fundamentally and irrevocably altered. I was no longer just Mark's quiet fiancé. I was a mystery to be solved. The general's old military colleagues, men with eagles and stars on their shoulders, now approached our table, not with condescension, but with a cautious, probing respect. "Captain Rojas," said one of them, testing my name as he shook my hand. "A pleasure. I don't believe our paths have crossed."
"My work keeps me mostly in D.C., sir," I would reply with a polite smile, offering no further details. They were fishing, trying to place me within their known universe of command structures, and my polite vagueness only seemed to deepen the mystery and their respect. Across the room, I watched the general. He sat at the head table, a king suddenly deposed. The usual crowd of admirers who would be flocking to hear his old war stories kept a respectful distance. He was isolated, a man adrift in a social sea whose currents he no longer understood. He would occasionally look over at me, his expression a complex mixture of confusion, resentment, and a dawning, grudging respect. He was finally seeing me, but he was seeing me through the reflection of a 4-star general's salute. The most touching moment of the evening came from Mark's mother. She approached me while I was speaking with a cousin, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She took both of my hands in hers. "Eva," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to apologize for David. He is a good man, but he is a proud man, and sometimes his pride makes him blind. He sees the world through such a narrow lens. I am so proud to call you my daughter today, not because of whatever it is you do, but because of the grace with which you do it." Later, during our first dance, Mark pulled me close, his chin resting on the top of my head. We swayed to the music, enveloped in our own private world. "So," he whispered into my hair, a smile in his voice. "Government consultant, huh?" I laughed softly. "It's a long story. We have a lifetime for it," he replied, pulling back to look at me. "I don't need to know the details ever. I just need you." But I have to say, seeing the look on my father's face, I have never been more proud or more in love with you than I was in that moment. Towards the end of a long, emotionally exhausting night, the general finally approached me. He found me standing alone on the terrace, getting a breath of fresh air. He stood beside me in silence for a full minute, looking out at the stars. "Eva," he began, his voice rough, "the commander, your service record, it must be exemplary." It was the closest he would ever get to an apology. It wasn't an admission that he had been cruel or judgmental. It was an acknowledgement in the only language he truly understood, the language of rank and accomplishment. He was conceding that my form of discipline, my brand of service, was valid. I didn't turn to look at him. I just watched the stars. "Thank you, General," I said softly. "I love your son very much. I just hope that now you can finally see the woman he sees." Our relationship was never warm, but it changed that day. It found a new foundation, one built not on his judgment, but on his grudging, hard-won respect. He started to ask questions, not about my rank, but about my thoughts on world events. He started to listen. I learned that true discipline isn't about projecting an image for others to see. It's not about a loud voice or a perfectly pressed uniform. It's a quiet internal fortitude. It's the strength to be true to your own path, to do the work that matters in silence, and to have the grace to let your actions speak for themselves. The salute from the commander was a wonderful moment, but the real victory was the life I was building with Mark. A life based not on ranks or medals, but on a foundation of mutual, unconditional respect. And that was a foundation no one could ever shake.
An incredible story proving that the deepest respect is earned, not demanded. What did you think of the general's reaction to that unforgettable salute? Have you ever been misjudged by someone who couldn't see your true worth? We would love to hear your experience in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of quiet strength and ultimate vindication, please show your support by hitting the like button, and be sure to subscribe for more stories just like this one. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching.